about a year and a half ago, we launched our first product in Europe, commercially available. And that's an aortic valve replacement that is delivered to the patient percutaneously. Now, aortic stenosis is a disease that progresses over time. And as it progresses, one of the therapeutic solutions for patients is really to get their valve replaced with a bioprosthesis or a mechanical valve via cardiac surgery. Now, some of those patients, they have such a severe disease and some comorbidities that go with it that they really are contraindicated or extreme risk for surgery. And until a few years ago, there was no real therapy solution for those patients, and they had to stay on medical therapy until they died. So today, we do provide that solution to them. So basically, we're able to replace their aortic valve percutaneously without open heart surgery. And after a year and a half ago, let me just show you.
Should I hold that for you?
I am happy to introduce our second generation delivery system. That's your clue to say, wow. So basically, the therapy, how it works is actually very simple. I'm going to need someone to help me with it.
Sure. It's better, ladies first.
So basically, a physician does, it's similar to a stent placement or catheterization. There is a puncture that goes into the groin, and then the catheter is inserted in retrograde percutaneous approach via the aortic arch through the native valve. And then once the catheter is in place with the direct flow system, the physician uncovers or unsheaths the valve, just rotating this green knob, and then it positions using the positioning wires. Now, the cool thing about this device, when we launched in Europe, there were already two competitors in the market. So the big strategic multinationals, Medtronic and Edwards, as Jeff mentioned. And all of those valves were based on a stent. So it's a metallic frame, and then there's the bovine pericardium that is forms the valve inside it, and it's sewn into the device. And our valve doesn't use any metallic frame. So the direct flow medical is an inflatable device. It's completely different. It uses a polymer frame. And once it's delivered, the physician can really optimize the results for the patient by repositioning the valve and checking before it finishes he finishes the procedure. With the current devices that are available in the market, you cannot do that. Basically, when you implant a metallic valve, you don't have any opportunity to really optimize the results, and then you have to go after bailout solutions such as valve-in-valve or even emergency surgery. So it's really a revolutionary concept because it addresses some of the limitations of the existing and older generation devices and really optimizes the result for the patient. Who are our customers? Obviously, we have our main customers are implanter physicians, so interventional cardiologists and cardiac surgeons as well. This is a transfemoral catheter, but we decided to have an agnostic approach and also approach cardiac surgeons that do use other types of approaches to deliver this technology to the patient. There are some others indirect customers. In Europe, we could call it the group purchasing organizations, where we focus very much on the price of the device that is delivered to them. And by delivering a solution that eliminates and simplifies and decreases the complication rates, we're able to reduce hospital stay and extend survival rates.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's actually a great opportunity. Our clinical advisor is a Wharton graduate. He's actually a med school graduate here at Wharton, and he's now in India. So I would have loved to actually have him here with us. The vision of Sensoria is that the next generation of ultra-personal computers are going to be woven or knitted into whatever we wear. And the reason why we think that's going to happen is very simple. I mean, we're all wearing a computer. Many of you are actually tapping on it right now. We're wearing a very powerful modem, a very powerful computer. It's our phone, right? If you go back to when I graduated in '87, computers were bulky and less than powerful. We all remember them. And still, people bought them because they ignited people's imagination for what they could do with them. And at Microsoft, we worked with the industry to democratize computing many years ago. My Mac, I was a Macintosh guy at that time, costed $3,800. My salary at Microsoft as an intern was $1,000 a month. So that was 4 salaries to just buy a computer. It's happening again. Right now, you actually see fancy, ultra-personal wristbands that only a few people can afford that are bulky, plasticky, and less than powerful. All they can do is really detect activity level, not really well, and they can only do one thing. Envision a time where we wake up in the morning, we pick up the clothing we want to wear, and each piece of clothing, depending on the contextual type of scenario, if I put on gym clothing as an example, we'll understand what type of biometric data that piece of clothing is going to be able to detect, collect, and communicate out in a privacy-oriented way, hopefully. We built an architecture that is comprised of textile sensors that can be embedded into a t-shirt or a sports bra, but we also had to build pressure sensors and force sensors to detect non-traditional vital signs that have been in existence for a long time, actually for hundreds of years, like gait. Gait has been in existence since the early Greek philosophers, if you think about it. Aristotle actually talked about gait and the science of human activity. The Italians and the Germans in the 1600s talked about the importance of gait and started actually collecting meaningful data about gait. But even today, unlike ECG or EKG, unlike many of the data sets that we collect, there is no simple, real-time, real-life way to collect and communicate this data to a researcher or to a clinician, right? Gait is really crucial for many different things. Neurology-related or diabetic-related diseases like peripheral neuropathy, rehab. If there is a different gait pattern, and I see some of the physicians in the room nodding, it's important because it's it's a way to detect a different stage in the disease of that potential patient, and therefore could be informing the diagnostic decisions for a physician. We're a very small startup, so we're staying out of the regulatory space. We're crazy, we're innovators, but we're not crazy enough to actually do 2 things at the same time, right? So I'm wearing one of my socks right now, and I can actually see that in real time, I'm detecting gait from the sock. Probably the least interesting part of a garment, right, if you think about it. I don't think socks have seen any level of innovation for the last 50 years. But that's the point, right? That's exactly the point.
Seamless.
It's totally seamless, right? So the cool thing is that now, thanks to technologies like Bluetooth 4, we can increase compliance and adherence for medical devices, if you think about it, right? I don't need to change my workflow as a consumer, and unfortunately, knock on wood, each consumer is becoming a patient from time to time, right? I'm going to wear my socks, I'm going to wear my t-shirt, off I go, and I get very meaningful, potentially, research or clinical data, and I can decide who to share that data with. So the second piece of the architecture that we had to build is, of course, a piece of electronics that can connect magnetically to a piece of garment. So it has to be flexible electronics. It contains traditional, we call it traditional, it's not very traditional, electronics that are the same electronics that you have in your smartphone, like an accelerometer or a magnetometer, right? So we know how that foot actually moves in space, not just how well it lands on the ground. And then we can actually start building and developing new type of applications as a developer that has never been built before. Think about a runner. 65 to 80% of people that go running in this country, and there are 36 million active runners in this country, get injured every single year. And we still don't know why. I go to a podiatrist and he says, change your shoes, right? So we really don't have a meaningful epidemiological conversation. So what if, instead of just detecting activity and the number of steps, we could actually detect impact forces, cadence, foot landing time on the ground, and convert that data in real time. I'm listening to my favorite music. I can just interrupt the music and say, hey, Davide, your heel's striking a lot more than you wanted to, or your cadence is off. So I don't have to wait until tonight to look at my pretty dashboard when I already know my knee hurts. I want to stop doing the things that make my knee hurt. The same type of analogy works for rehab. A patient comes to me and says, Mary, did you do your exercises? And she says, yes, she thinks she did, right? But Did she actually do it? I can open a dashboard at that point and see, well, Mary, what do you do on Wednesday? Because on Wednesday you never do your exercises. Think about an inspect versus expect model, where it's a consumer-driven and clinician-driven model, where there is a conversation that is a meaningful conversation with a diabetic patient suffering from peripheral neuropathy. He doesn't know what offloading means. Today we're asking him, and as a secondary prevention scenario, we're asking him, offload that area of your foot, and here is a scooter, here is a cam boot. First of all, he's a type 2 diabetic patient, so he doesn't even know what offloading means. And number two, he's probably not the most disciplined person in the world. He's a type 2 diabetic patient, right? We want to actually connect the dots between the clinician and the patient. It's going to take a long time. So think about us as the Gore-Tex of wearables. We want the plastic to disappear. We want to actually inject sensing technology, computing technology, whatever people want to wear instead of have to wear. And our competitors are really coming out there. You'll see probably Nike, you see some of the Under Armour. You see this company probably looking at this type of scenarios. And we think that the boundary between sports and fitness and healthcare are blurring very quickly. With all the aging baby boomers around, we think we all want to have a more quantified experience with our physician. And it's not just going to be Google-driven, it's going to be our own data-driven. Some of these conversations will scare some physicians, and some physicians will welcome it. But it's going to happen. The current product we have, to answer Jeff's last question, is a product for runners. But the real product that we're coming out with is what we call the Sensoria Developer Kit. So we have about 50 developers right now building applications around the world that go from rehab to Argentinian tango training to cycling to golf. It doesn't really matter what the application is as long as we start getting data and start the conversation with the researchers so we can inject science in what we do and then hopefully have meaningful information both for the clinician and for the patient as well.
My name is Hjalmar Pompe van Meerdervoort, a long Dutch name, but Pompe is the easier way of describing it. I imagine everyone in the room is familiar with endoscopic surgery. The natural offshoot to that for our very active culture is arthroscopic surgery. Our firm is working in commercializing and making a market in doing some of that arthroscopic surgery in an office setting. So in essence, we take a traditional tower-based system that are used in ORs throughout the world every day, and we make it 1/5 the size so that an endoscopic camera can fit through a 18-gauge needle and allow a physician to get a full diagnostic view of any type of pathology within intercapsular view. So, as you may be aware, the gold standard for musculoskeletal orthopedics is a endoscopic view or arthroscopic view. So our game plan is to be able to provide that to physicians in real time in an office setting in a way that is tolerable for a patient setting. So the key here is we're not making a market in a brand new way of doing things. We're actually just changing the site of service. So two foundational elements to the firm was one, try to keep the equipment that the system's based on very similar to what they're using every day, thereby diminishing the learning curve, and secondarily follow traditional medical principles, in this case arthrocentesis, or the ability to deliver fluid or aspirate fluid from joints in such a sense that you understand the concerns around patient tolerance, infection, and so forth. Our business then really is in improving diagnostic accuracy for physicians. In this case, musculoskeletal physicians. There certainly is a broadening element to the platform technology where it comes to women's health, et cetera, et cetera. So we make just high quality optics at a very small piece. The key beauty to our system is we make it in a sense that doesn't require sterilization or fluid management. So it's a true scope where you would pop it in like a needle, at the end of which you would throw away everything involved in the case. So it is a razor blade type of model. I'll pass this around, but this is a sheathing technology that covers a non-sterile endoscope. So you're able then at the end of each procedure just to dispense with the kit and go on to another one. So traditionally, arthroscopic surgeons would do 4 or 5 of these in 1 hour period of time. The business is then, again, providing better diagnostics in the simple term, but I often tell my board and those who are interested stakeholders it's more in behavioral modification than it really is in providing a product. And that speaks to some of the challenges I think we'll talk about a little bit later on critical mass. But again, enabling a disruptive way of doing a diagnostic is a lot of what we do. Currently, we have no competition in this sense, but it is the incumbent processes out there. Think of that in the form of MRI, think of that in the form of, again, surgery, whether that's a diagnostic surgery or therapeutic surgery. So those are very well entrenched, highly compensated at times, competitors in that regard. But again, we believe that there are a number of stakeholders that find this type of technology attractive. One of the key elements to the early stages of the company has been what I suggest, laying the table. Having conducted pivotal trials and a lot of health economic data sets, we've been able to obtain coding that makes this a viable product for the office setting. The overall cost of the equipment is less than MRIs and certainly less than diagnostic surgeries, and the experience for the patient is significantly better, in our opinion, versus an MRI and certainly versus a diagnostic surgery in the OR. So in aligning our general direction across those three stakeholders, again, we think the company's positioned to do well. So I think it's important, and maybe I took a contrarian view of this, because the second question you had was, what is critical mass? And I think you have to consider it in the stage that certainly we are. To us, critical mass would be, I would call it predictive adoption. So, in essence, a lesson or an ability to say, look, if we do something, we know the predictive outcome of that. And that's one of the key challenges, in my humble opinion, of any new technology. So if you have predictive adoption, you can, at this stage of a company, you can certainly deploy the resources to either the areas getting stuck, if you will, or maximize the areas that are beneficial. As I mentioned, in our case, we have multiple stakeholders, that may be customers, if you think of it in that terms. So certainly, as patients and the lay public find out about these kinds of things, it becomes attractive to them, particularly as they become more savvy consumers of healthcare, whether it's the result of high deductible health plans or the ubiquitous information out there on general knowledge on the internet. Certainly the health plans themselves, as they learn that there are modalities perhaps less expensive and certainly lower risk for their plan members, they too become customers. So for us, a critical mass for us is not per se in volumetric terms when you hit the tipping point, but it's really understanding predictively how do you roll out this new technology, and then it's a race between certainly the funding, the money you have, versus the time you have.
Well, in our case, TAVR today is a really fast-growing market, and there are two different things. In the US, the situation is that there are already two competitors in the marketplace. They're doing about 12,000 procedures a year, and in Europe, that number is raised to about 30,000. When we started a year ago in Europe, there were still these two competitors that are available today in the US were also in Europe, and this year we're facing 5 new competitors. So that gives you a sense of how fast this business is growing, and also the increased interest from other companies into entering this space. So for us, really, another point of background also that's interesting to note is that this market is supposed or forecasted to grow, or to at least double its size in the next 3 years. And we're talking about a $2 billion market worldwide. So it's a really fast-growing and interesting space. So for us as an emerging company, grabbing a fair amount of share of that is already reaching a critical mass. Right now, our biggest challenge is to manage our own growth, is really having the internal resources in place to deal with that growth in a cost-consciousness way. We're a private equity-backed company, and we have to compete with large multinational strategics. So there is a lot of work for us to do in the background to be able to compete with that. The second challenge I think we also face, which is a competitive advantage actually, is how we, being small, how we're able to really connect with the customer and keep this startup type of mindset. We're able, for example, to partner with key opinion leaders and able to present scientifically data and really influence the audience in a way that if we were a multinational company, there would be so many layers that we wouldn't have this kind of direct and intimate contact with the customers. And finally is to really be prepared, when we reach the US market, for example, to deliver a still competitive technology, given all the changes and the length of approvals that we need to go through. Our technology in 2 years will still be valid, we believe, because of the great clinical outcomes that we've been able to show, both in Europe as well as with the pivotal trial that we're starting in the US right now.
Well, our primary challenge until now, being a much smaller company, of course, we're a true startup with 20 people, was to recruit talent and also design textile sensors that could be washable and manufacturable. I'll give you a fun example. A sock knitting machine is a round machine with hundreds of needles. The sock I'm wearing is a computer. So I need vertical lines to drive power to the sensor and get data from the sensor. Well, a round mechanical fancy machine can draw a vertical line, cutting it at each round, right? So if you try to cut your computer in half, it still looks like a computer. It's just not going to work that great, right? So we had to just face not just pure research challenges in designing the sensor, but operational and manufacturing challenges in figuring out how a supply chain that is not equipped to build computing equipment can work with us. So we just to give you an idea, we had to interview over 70 sock manufacturing companies and sock knitting machine development companies to figure out and find one that could actually do what we were asking for. So the level of complexity is still substantially, very high in building what we're building. It's bad news, but it's also good news because that also provides barriers of entry for the imitators. The challenge that we really have in front of us is now validating the concepts that we have. And we don't have a lot of money, right? So we as I said, we cannot do two things at the same time. So what we did was we ran a crowdfunding campaign. So instead of actually running a clinical trial, which we didn't have money for anyway, we said, well, let's just reach out to the runners and see if runners would buy a $199 piece of electronics and a pair of socks. So we sold about 5,000 units, and we're still selling. And the good news is that will help us with the next level challenge, which is the data, of course, right? And the predictive analytics that can come with it. And that's just for running, of course, right? So we have to walk or run before we run. So the next level is going to be, of course, reaching out to researchers. But the cool thing is that by starting from the consumer side and by being at Fashion Week and getting on the Wall Street Journal twice in a week, now the researchers at University of Arizona or in Dallas, Texas, they're now reaching to us and saying, what is this tool that you have? Can we apply for a grant with you, right? That's, if we had gone there a year and a half ago, I'm afraid the conversation would have been a very short one, right? So right now, actually, there is competition to actually apply for grants on our technology, which is healthy competition, because as some of you said yesterday, last night, David in particular, there is a challenge in misaligned incentives in this country, and not just in this country, between researchers that want to be publishing first, right? Instead of actually doing the right thing for everybody, which is talk to each other and actually get through a study and get into commercialization faster. The FDA approval for us, I don't think is going to be super challenging. I think the regulatory space for a SOC is going to be a class 1 exempt medical device, not super challenging.
Be careful what you say.
But you never know. But you never know. But the reimbursement models are going to be challenging, of course, unless we do the homework and the research that needs to inject the data and the meaningful information into what we're building. So it's going to be a journey.